Tuesday, 21st July 2011, the Central Bank Governor, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, came to the House of Representatives on the invitation of the lawmakers. The 360 members, like all Nigerians, had questions regarding some new policies scheduled for implementation by the Apex Bank, issues that only the CBN governor could answer. Deputy Speaker, Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, standing in for the Speaker, set the tone for the session.
You will recall that on Tuesday, 19 July 2011, the House, in a resolution, invited the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to appear and brief the House pursuant to Section 8, 4, and 5 of the Central Bank of Nigeria Act 2007, and to address the House specifically on the policies of cash withdrawal limits and the introduction of interest-free banking model in Nigeria. It is my privilege now to invite the Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Madam Sanusi, to address the House and respond strictly to the issues that have been raised in our communication to you and which I just explained now. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Right Honorable Speaker. And good morning, distinguished honorable members of the House of Reps. Now, may I begin by thanking the House for inviting me to discuss these two issues that are topical in our country, and for providing me with the opportunity to provide the needed clarification and to shed light on some of the misunderstandings around these two policies. As a first point, the central bank never limited the amount of cash that you can withdraw from a bank. The circular limits the amount of cash you can withdraw in a day without charge. And that's an important distinction. You can withdraw any amount of money from the bank, but if as an individual you withdraw over 150,000 naira, there is a cost. If as a corporate you withdraw more than 1 million naira a day, there is a cost. So this is first of all what the policy was. The circular is there, gentlemen. That is the first misunderstanding that I think we should clear. You see, what I discovered is that 99% of the people who have spoken about the cash limit policy have never read the circular. The circular was very, very clear. If as an individual you want to withdraw more than 150,000 naira in a single day from a bank, then for amounts drawn over 150,000 naira, there's a charge. Now that is what the circular is. The cash limit policy is only one small part of a comprehensive process and comprehensive program of payment system transformation. If you look at an average bank, when you go to borrow for your car loan, for your housing loan, for your personal loan, and the National Assembly, in fact, has spoken about this often, the huge spread between what you get on your deposits and what you pay the banks on the loans. 2 years ago, when I was being screened at the National Assembly, I was asked what I would do about it. And I explained that there is no magic wand. That spread partly reflects the profit charge of the banks, and it substantially reflects the huge costs of doing business in Nigeria. Some of the things are beyond the control of the central bank. If you take a very large bank with 400, 500 branches, and because of the lack of power, the bank has to have generators in every branch, it has to have diesel, It has to provide its own security. It needs armored trucks. All of these add to the costs. But there are some things we can do something about. One of these costs is cash management. The size of the bank branches, the amount of money being spent on managing cash, moving cash, processing cash when there are alternatives. We all travel all over the world. Nobody goes to the UK and carries £1 million. Nobody goes to the United States and takes $1 million because he wants to transfer from one person to another. This program has 5 pillars from an operations perspective. There's a cash management pillar where you industrialize cash management. We don't think every bank needs to have its own cash management center. It's not banking, it's cash management. You can have 2, 3 cash management companies that transport cash to all the banks. They handle the cash, they count it, they process it, they bring it to the central bank for destruction. The idea that 24 banks in Nigeria should have 24 bank offices doing cash management adds to your cost. So when you go and borrow at 25%, some of the cost you're paying is the cost of cash management. We have a payment system transformation, which is aimed at addressing 60% of the cost of cash distribution. And to do this, we need to facilitate the growth of electronic payments and increase the availability, reliability, and security of electronic channels. And payment systems are a key driver in the cost of distribution. We have an IT infrastructure and services initiative where we expect banks to share things like data centers, disaster recovery, business continuity centers. Not every bank needs to invest heavily in all of that, and all of these reduce the cost of transaction for the banking industry. We're setting up IT standards. Now, if you go to a country like Spain, the Spanish banks have a cost-to-income ratio of about 40%, compared to over 60% for Nigerian banks. And one of the reasons is that the regulator there sets IT standards, and all banks comply with those standards, and information technology drives operations rather than manual processes. Then, centralized back office operations, both within the large banks and among banks. Now, the cash limit policy falls squarely under payment systems transformation. Now, and what we said was that an individual can have a free cash withdrawal limit of 150,000 naira a day. I refer you to slide number 8 and slide number 9. On slide number 8, you can see that cash transactions represent about 99% of all transactions that are done in the banking hall. People walk in to take cash. But the interesting slide is slide number 9. In 2009, total cash transactions in the Nigerian banking industry were about 2 trillion naira. That's people just walking into the bank to take cash over the counter. In 2009, 2 trillion. Now, out of this, 86% of the transactions were for less than 100,000 naira. 86%. 90% of the transactions were for less than 150,000 naira. 45% of the transactions were for less than 10,000 naira. People were going to the bank, queuing up for 3 hours, for 4 hours to collect 3,000 naira, 2,000 naira, 4,000 naira. And it makes sense. How many Nigerians earn 150,000 naira? A country where 70% of the population lives on less than $1 a day. How many Nigerians can go and cash 150,000 naira in a day? It's less than 10%. That's what the numbers have shown. But look on the right. This 10%, that is 150,000 naira and above, the total value of the cash they moved was 1.5 trillion naira, or 71% of the total cash activity in the banks. So the poor people who go for 5,000, 10,000, and who go to borrow and pay 25% are effectively subsidizing the rich ones who go and take 20 million naira cash, 30 million naira cash, and for this, the banks have to have armored vehicles, they have to provide security, they have to keep staff, they have to bring the cash for destruction, the central bank has to pay, and the total cost of cash management in the banking industry is projected at 2012 to 200 billion naira. So we're spending effectively 140, 150 billion naira as cost to provide services to people who have alternatives. Because today, every Nigerian bank does electronic funds transfer. Every Nigerian bank. You want to transfer 1 million naira, 20 million, 100 million naira, you give an instruction, your bank will transfer. Just give an account number. Today, as I speak to you, from next week, NIPS is starting a test in 5 banks of what is called NIPS Instant. If you go to your bank and ask for a transfer, it will be done instantly and you get a confirmation. Nothing like go and come, and we're going to roll it out on the 24 banks. So the people that are going for 1 million, 20 million, 30 million, they have options. It's not ATM on POS. So the argument that we don't have ATMs on, they have options today. They can do electronic funds transfer, they can do SWIFT, they can sit in their homes, get on the internet, and do that transfer themselves. All banks have internet banking. So if they choose, for whatever reason, that they won't do internet, they won't do EFT, they won't do SWIFT, they want to go into the bank and collect 30 million naira cash in Ghana must go bags, they should pay. They should pay. That is all. Pay the price for it. Okay? Now, so that deals with the upper stratum. Okay? Now, it doesn't address the entire problem because you still have all these people that come to the bank to collect 3,000 naira, 4,000 naira, 10,000 naira. And they have to stand in line, and they also constitute a cost. And for those people, we feel it is absolutely critical that we modernize the payment system. I'll give you another slide to give you an idea of where we are. Go to slide 12. This slide just gives you the point of sales density in Nigeria, to give you an idea of where we are. Today, for every 100,000 Nigerians, we have 13 point of sales terminals. 13 for 100,000. Gentlemen, Uganda has 453. Namibia has 338. Mexico has 592. Malaysia has 1,063. Singapore 2,091. Brazil 2,247 ATMs for 100,000 people. All of these people can just go to a POS, use the terminal to collect cash. They can pay cash. POSs now can actually handle checks. You don't need to go and clog a bank branch. And we set ourselves a target. We said by 2015, Nigeria will be where Brazil is today. And it's achievable. We know what it requires. It is not magic. People are getting worried because they're thinking of constraints we had years ago. Main One cable has arrived in Lagos. Glow cable has arrived in Lagos. Main one today is using 0.5% of its capacity. You've got 99.5% that's not being used. The whole of Lagos is on fiber optic. So what does it take? And between now and December, we are going to put out in Lagos 60,000 POS terminals. And Lagos will be cashless. It's not a problem. It will be cashless. And we'll do it. Why do you want to go and stand for 3 hours in a branch when you can use your card? And as a country, we must have ambition. You get on a plane today, you want to go to Nairobi. You don't think, where do I get Kenyan shillings? You take your card in your pocket. Because you land in Nairobi and if you need shillings, you can go to a POS terminal, an ATM terminal, and take cash. If you want to eat, you go to a restaurant and you take your card. Now, enter your car to drive from Abuja to Lagos. You need to carry 200,000 naira to buy petrol, to change your tire, to buy food, because all our transactions are cash-based. In fact, if you are traveling out of Nigeria, apart from people like you and I that maybe are sure that when we land at 3 a.m., a driver will be there with security, people travel out of Nigeria and carry naira. Because if they land in Abuja or Lagos at 3 a.m. without cash in their pocket, they will sleep in the airport. Now, don't we want to change this country? We have to change it. We want to be among the 20 biggest financial services industries in the world. And we don't have simple things like POSs. I don't know how many of you a week ago saw a CNN program on mobile banking in Kenya. A farmer in a village in Kenya can pick up his phone and on his phone order fertilizer and use his telephone to make a payment. We have just issued 16 mobile payment approvals for licenses, plus 8 that have just been issued. If I have my way, in another year or two, in a village, you don't need to have a bank branch. If there is an MTN recharge card seller, he can take your KYC, open an account for you in any bank of your choice, and you can use your telephone to make transactions. When we do our agricultural reforms and NERSL, when we go to a place like Kano and we do tomato, we're not just going to look at irrigation and seeds and fertilizers and training and technical assistance. We're going to do that. But we are bringing mobile companies, we are bringing payment systems companies, and in the village, as we are teaching people how to use high-yield variety of seeds, we're teaching them how to use their telephone to order fertilizer, to order seed, how to use their telephone to transfer money from account to account. This is financial inclusion. Kenya has done it. Namibia, I'm not talking about America or Portugal or England. I'm talking about Kenya. Kenya, Namibia, they've done it. So this is all about ambition. And to be honest with you, all the people complaining about cash limit are the rich people. It's not the poor people, because I know that there are very few Nigerians that have the ability to take 150,000 naira in a day from their account as a percentage of Nigerians. And all the people that take 20 million, 30 million naira, they have alternatives today. If for whatever reason, I don't know, people have different reasons, you choose that you don't want to transfer, you want to carry cash and move it, fine, you pay the cost of cash handling. That is all we have said. The final thing on this, I would say two things. Nigeria has risked being blacklisted several times for money laundering. And one of the major drivers of money laundering operations is high level of cash transactions that cannot be traced. This National Assembly passed a law in 2004, the Money Laundering Act. In that law, it is illegal to have a cash transaction in excess of 500,000 naira outside the banking industry. It is illegal. It is not being enforced. Why? How can you enforce it when you can go to a bank and take 20 million naira free? How can you enforce a limit of 500,000 naira on cash transactions? How do you get people into the banking system if they don't need the banks? How do you trace transactions? So as we try to improve the image of this country and move into standards that are acceptable internationally and build our reputation, we have to have regulations that check. And it's not just naira. You have a situation today in Nigeria where a secondary school is asking people to pay school fees in dollars. Where you go to rent a house and the landlord is saying, pay me in dollars. In Nigeria, we have to stop importation of dollars. We cannot be promoting within Nigeria the circulation of a foreign country's currency. And we will come out with it. If you want, you can have an exchange rate. Every time the exchange rate moves, you increase your rent. That is your decision. But if you live in Nigeria, and I don't care where you're from, you accept payments in naira. Because that is the currency of this country. Now, these things are part of a comprehensive reform of payment system. They are controversial. We will continue to explain, but I do hope that this clarifies what this policy is. And we said we'll start with pilots, because somebody called me and said, oh, he's protesting on behalf of Fulani cattle rearers. I said, I'm Fulani. I have not seen any nomads in Lagos. I have not seen nomads in Kano. I have not seen them in Aba. I have not seen them in Abuja. We said we're doing pilot. We've worked with the government of Lagos State. His Excellency Governor Fashola has given us total support. We have a committee involving central bank. We have the banks. We have mobile companies. We have POS providers. Okay? We have everybody in the value chain for transforming the payment system. And we have no doubt that if you go to Lagos in January 2012, you will see a difference. And we'll get to a point where if you're driving from Abuja to Lagos, you carry your card. You don't even think twice. You go to a petrol station, use your card to buy petrol. Go into the supermarket to buy food. Go to a pharmacy to buy drugs, as happens everywhere else in the world. This tendency to view every single national matter as either ethnic or religious will not get us anywhere. You have an election, and the concern is not about power or infrastructure or education. It is about whether the president comes from the north or the south of the Niger. This is not how we should run a country, and I think for those of us who are opinion shapers and who are leaders in society, we must recognize that everything that happens, okay, has to start somewhere. And I think it's important that we understand what is the rationale, what is the basis, and how does it affect the country as a whole. Non-interest banking is provided for in the Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act of 1991. And I have given you attached as Appendix B extracts from the Central Bank of Nigeria Act and BOFIA. And if you look at the second page, Section 66 of BOFIA says, in this act, unless the content otherwise requires, profit and loss sharing bank means a bank which transacts investment or commercial banking business and maintains profit and loss sharing accounts. So profit and loss sharing banks, non-interest banks, are allowed. Now, there are different types of profit and loss sharing banks, and one established type are called Islamic banks. Now, this is not a name invented by the Central Bank of Nigeria. If you go to London today and you walk down Edgware Road, you will see Islamic Bank of Britain. It's there. HSBC has an Islamic banking subsidiary called Amana. Standard Chartered Bank has a subsidiary called Sadiq. It's an Islamic bank. Citibank in Khartoum is an Islamic bank. You speak of commercial banking, merchant banking, investment banking, microfinance banking, community banking, Islamic banking. It is a product. Now, it's not religion. It's a $1 trillion business. If a profit and loss bank engages in the business of financing breweries, it is not an Islamic bank. So in addition to banning interest, there are certain ethical principles, certain products that the bank does not deal in. Islamic bank does not finance breweries. It does not finance casinos. It does not do pornography or prostitution. And it does not engage in speculative transactions like options and futures. That is all. It has nothing to do with mosque, nothing to do with law. It is just a bank that does not accept interest, does not finance alcohol, does not finance gambling, does not finance pornography, and does not take part in excessive speculation. That is the definition of the product. Now, in 1991, when BOFIA was amended, the central bank started receiving applications from parties that wanted to set up non-interest banks. Between 91 and 93, we received applications from two banks, Al Barka Bank and Al Aqida Bank. I repeat that this name is Al Aqida because the last time I said Al Aqida, Channel said I said the terrorist group Al Qaeda. The name is Al Aqida, and Al Qaeda, to the best of my knowledge, did not exist and never applied. For some reasons, they didn't meet the terms of a license. In the 1990s, Habib Bank applied and got approval of the central bank to set up an Islamic banking window. In 2004, Jaiz International Bank applied to set up a non-interest bank based on Islamic banking principles. Now, as we go through these appendices, may I remind the House, I became governor of the central bank on 1st June 2009. So anything that happened before June 2009 happened before I came to the central bank. If you go to Appendix C of the documents that you are given, this is a letter from the Central Bank of Nigeria dated 18th of May 2005 to Jaiz International Bank PLC, the promoters, referring to their application for a banking license, okay, and giving them a no objection for Jaiz. So the Jaiz approval in principle was first given in 2005. Another issue that has been raised, I think it's been raised by Khan, is the membership of the Islamic Financial Services Board. If you go to Appendix D, you have a letter dated November 12, 2008, sent by Mr. Tundele Mo, who is here, who was Deputy Governor, to the Islamic Financial Services Board, conveying the decision of the central bank to join the Islamic Financial Services Board as a full member. Still in that appendix, there's a big memo. I have actually decided, in the interest of transparency and full disclosure, to bring internal documents and circulate to members of the House. There is this memo that you can see. It's an internal memo done to Governor Charles Soludo, asking for approval for Nigeria Central Bank to join Islamic Financial Services Board as a full member. And you can see on the face of it in red, signed by Governor Soludo, approved on the 28th of October 2008. Now, on that memo, I refer you to page 8. Page 8 of that memo, I'm going to read two paragraphs, the first paragraph and the third paragraph. Paragraph 1 says, in Nigeria, and this was in 2008, it says, in Nigeria, institutions, namely Bank PHB, commenced window Islamic banking since 1999. Intercontinental Bank, UBA, Standard Chartered, sought our approval to operate an Islamic banking window, while a full-fledged request for an Islamic banking license is being processed by the department. The third paragraph says, presently, the department has constituted a committee to develop the supervisory and regulatory framework for the operations of Islamic banking in Nigeria in line with best practice. The committee, led by the Deputy Governor, Financial Sector Surveillance, who's sitting here, he's Reverend Tunde Lemo, undertook a study tour to Malaysia. And the visit affords the committee the opportunity to visit IFSB. Now, this internal document is a 2008 document. And the visit to Malaysia was carried out in 2008. The agreement, membership agreement, as Appendix E is there, signed by Deputy Governor Lemo and Rifat Abdul Karim on 8th of January 2009, 6 months before I became governor. Members will note I'm trying in this presentation to anticipate some of the objections and basically give the information. The guidelines for Islamic banking, or the guidelines for non-interest banking, I refer members to Appendix J. Appendix J is a notice of meeting of the Financial System Stability Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The second page there gives you the members of the committee, chaired by Governor Soludo. We have Ernest Abi, who is no longer with us. We have Sarah Alade, Tunde Lemo, Suleiman Baro. The three of them are in this hall, who sat in that meeting on 23rd February 2009. I have photocopied the relevant page, which is page 7. And that page, the very last thing before closing, memo on proposed framework for the regulation and supervision of non-interest banks in Nigeria. The meeting considered the paper as read and approved it accordingly. January 2009. Now, what is this paper that was approved? That is the paper you have as Appendix F, the draft framework for regulation and supervision of non-interest banks in Nigeria. Now, this was the framework released, and I keep repeating, ladies and gentlemen, this framework was released before I became governor, before I was appointed governor. And I will read from the introduction. A non-interest bank means a bank which transacts banking business, engages in trading, investments, and commercial activities, as well as the provision of financial products and services in accordance with the principles and rules of Islamic commercial jurisprudence. Transactions and contracts under this type of banking are non-permissible if they involve interest, uncertainty, gambling, speculation, unjust enrichment, or exploitation and unfair trade practices. And then you've got the rest of the document. Now, this definition was a very controversial definition. This guideline was issued in March 2009. We left it out there for comments from stakeholders for 8 months. Based on the comments of stakeholders, the guidelines were updated and released in January 2011. But a number of things remained that caused concern in the public domain. And I directed a number of amendments to these guidelines. The first complaint, and the central bank considered this complaint a valid complaint, was that the definition of non-interest banking in the guidelines restricted it to Islamic banking, which meant that if you want to set up a profit and loss bank that's not an Islamic bank, you cannot do it. And it was a valid criticism. So we reissued the guidelines in June this year. We had a more general definition of non-interest banking, and I refer you to Appendix H. This is the guideline that we issued in June. In that guideline, if you go to the bottom of page 3, we defined a non-interest financial institution as a bank or other financial institution under the purview of the Central Bank of Nigeria, which transacts business, engages in trading, investment, and commercial activities, as well as the provision of products and services in accordance with any established non-interest banking principles. Now, we then recognized that Islamic banks are one form of non-interest banks. They are non-interest banks that, in addition to not taking interest, don't do alcohol, don't do piggery, don't do gambling, don't do speculation. But if there are other people who want to set up a profit and loss bank that will lend to breweries, they can lend to it. It's just not an Islamic bank. It's another form of non-interest bank. The second criticism was that the documents that were issued before kept mentioning the word Sharia. I think somebody said Sharia was mentioned 35 times in the document. And I felt Sharia is just an Arabic word. It's an English language document. Remove it and put Islamic commercial jurisprudence. And if there's a Sharia Advisory Council, because the Islamic Bank of Britain has a Sharia Advisory Council. Every Islamic bank has a Sharia Advisory Council, but if it is a sensitive word, we called it Advisory Council of Experts. Now, I had a lot of flack from Muslims. I had somebody who came to me and said that I removed Sharia from the document. It's no longer Islamic banking. And I told him that in the entire Quran, Sharia is mentioned only once. So mentioning it 35 times in a document or removing it has no bearing on whether it's Islamic banking. So we removed it. The third concern was that people did not understand, even though we kept saying it, people did not understand that these banks are non-faith biased. That These products are available to Muslims and Christians, and they are not restricted to Muslims. And in fact, I do know that in many countries, if you go to Malaysia, the majority of the people who patronize Islamic banks tend to be even non-Muslims. They're the Chinese businessmen. Jaiz itself has at least 60 Christian shareholders. The second largest shareholder in Jaiz is a Christian from Igbo land. The point I'm making is, so we said, okay, look, if people, we cannot leave it to just assumption that this is non-discrimination. So if you go to the guidelines we issued on page 13, and these guidelines are on our website, you can just go to our website and print them. 16.2, discrimination on grounds of faith or ethnicity or any other grounds in the participation by individuals or institutions as promoters, shareholders, depositors, employees, customers, or other relevant parties in any transaction regarding a non-interest financial institution, whether based on Islamic or other model, is strictly prohibited. The central bank, by law, is obliged to issue guidelines for how they will operate. The way we issue guidelines for commercial banking and merchant banking and mortgage banking and microfinance banking and discount houses, we cannot license an institution without issuing guidelines. The central bank is not setting up an Islamic bank. The central bank is not advertising Islamic banking, which is why we have been accused of not communicating enough. But I have told communications people that we must make a distinction between explaining our role as a regulator and being a marketer for a product. It is for Jaiz to talk about the benefits of Islamic banking. It's not for the central bank. We can talk about it for financial inclusion and so on, but it is for the promoters of the bank to advertise their product. While the central bank has been regulating Islamic banking, I don't know if the House is aware that the Securities and Exchange Commission in January this year had issued guidelines for Islamic funds, and that in fact you have Lotus Capital, which is an Islamic fund, and you have ARM and Standard Bank that have set up funds in line with the set guidelines on Islamic funds. I also don't know if members are aware that the NDIC has issued guidelines to the market for Islamic insurance for deposits. I also don't know if members are aware that at least 3 insurance companies in Nigeria for almost 10 years have been offering Islamic insurance or takaful. African Alliance has been offering, Cornerstone, and another. I don't know if we are aware that the federal government of Nigeria under General Obasanjo actually increased our membership of Islamic Development Bank to full member, and the Minister of Finance has a representative as an executive director in the Islamic Development Bank. And out of the 10 biggest companies that have borrowed from the Islamic Development Bank since its inception, only 1 is owned by a Muslim. 9, I have a list of the Nigerian companies that have borrowed from Islamic Development Bank. Only 1 is a Muslim out of the top 10. The only state that has borrowed from the Islamic Development Bank, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, is Anambra State. I know we laugh about this, but it is something that as Nigerians we have to learn. I mean, Anambra State just saw that this is a product, looked at the benefit, and went and applied. And they're benefiting from it. The misrepresentations have been so many. You know, people talk about me having studied Islamic law. They don't talk about the fact that at the age of 8, my parents took me to a boarding Catholic school, and that I went to St. Anne's in Kaduna. And every day I said, Our Father and Hail Mary. They don't talk about the fact that when I went to King's College, I had the choice of taking Islamic religious knowledge and Bible knowledge. I studied Bible knowledge and got a distinction. And you can ask my mates in KC. I have never known anything called tribalism. I have seen a very senior Christian cleric in a church accuse me of removing Christians from decision-making positions in the central bank. I became governor in 2009. The term of the board of directors of the central bank expired. I recommended a board for reappointment to President Yar'Adua. On the board of the central bank, we have 11 members, only 3 are Muslim. The Monetary Policy Committee of the central bank was not constituted when I became governor. The Committee of Governors took the decisions. I constituted it. I recommended 7 external members of the MPC. Only 1 is a Muslim. A deputy governor's seat became open when I was governor. Dr. Kingsley Moghalu was in Geneva. I went, convinced him to come back to Nigeria, and convinced the president to appoint him. On our 5-member COG, only 3. 3 are Christians, 2 are Muslims. We have 24 departmental directors in the central bank that I appointed. Only 8 are Muslim. I never even thought of counting religion until I read that sermon. It was never a consideration. And these are the people who take these decisions. The Director of Financial Policy and Regulation, who signed the guidelines and issued the guidelines and developed the guidelines, his name is Christian Chukwu. The government of Japan is raising money through Islamic Sukuk. The government of the United States has raised money through Islamic Sukuk. At a time when the capital markets have dried up, the government of Malaysia 2 weeks ago issued a Sukuk trying to raise $2 billion. In 6 days, they had $9 billion because there's so much money in the Middle East going into those products. The ICRC in Nigeria is working with the central bank and the DMO to develop products. We want to advise the finance minister to go and tap into those markets in Asia and bring in $4-5 billion to finance infrastructure in the country. So in terms of being a financial product that opens up the economy, good for financial inclusion, for diversifying funding base, that is a discussion we should be having. It's not about Islamization. The central bank is not a religious institution. It's a Nigerian institution. And you've seen Governor Charles Soludo was a Christian and a Catholic. But he did more to promote and establish guidelines for regulating Islamic banking than any governor before him. And all I'm doing is completing the work. Now, I think as leaders, we need, on the one hand, to be very sensitive to people, which means we need to explain as much as possible and clarify the position, and I will continue to explain. I will continue to clarify. But we cannot continue to apologize for doing our work. And we cannot continue with this conversation at that level. We've got to continue raising it to a higher level because we want to get to a point where Nigerians are now saying, is it good for Nigeria or bad for Nigeria? Forget the sentiment. So I thought I would explain this. The law is there from 1991. The process had been ongoing before I became governor. We have tried to put finishing touches to it, and for all we are concerned as central bank, We are simply carrying out our responsibility of making sure that people do not open up a bank and take people's deposits and then have those deposits go down the drain. We have to regulate and license and supervise the institution. I do hope that I have addressed many of the issues, including some that have been tangential to it. I do hope, because I have the highest, like I said, I went to a Catholic school. The reason I have not come out to reply to bishops or to reply to cans is because I have to continue respecting religious authorities. I have indicated to them privately I am willing to meet any of them. I have actually asked to be invited to the Catholic Bishops' Council in July. I'm willing to go to Cannes. I'm willing to go to any church. I'm willing to go to explain to anyone who wants to understand what we are doing and why we are doing. But I don't want this to be a religious conversation. I don't want it to be an emotional conversation. I want to be discussing about finance, about economics, about regulation, about financial inclusion, because I'm the governor of a central bank. I'm not on a pulpit.